I'm Daisy, 55 years old, and I thought my marriage of 30 years to Andrew was unbreakable. We built a multi-million-dollar business together from nothing. Well, I built it. He was the face. When his sister Eleanor showed up at our door with divorce papers, she smirked and said, "He's too busy with his business." With a calm, I didn't feel I nodded, and asked her to give him another envelope in return. What he didn't realize was that I'd been preparing for this day for years. Before I tell you what was in the envelope, I sent back to him, "Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you believe what goes around comes around, and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables on my husband's betrayal." I met Andrew during our sophomore year at State University. I was the quiet accounting major with perfect grades. He was the charming business student struggling to pass financial management. Our economics professor paired us up for tutoring, and I still remember Andrew's boyish grin when I explained depreciation in terms of his beloved car losing value every year. "You make numbers make sense," he told me after he aced his midterm. "No one's ever done that for me before." I came from a modest background. My father worked at the local paper mill, and my mother was a school cafeteria cook. They scraped together just enough for my tuition, with scholarships covering the rest. I worked weekends at a local diner to pay for books and essentials. Andrew's family was different. His father owned a regional chain of furniture stores, and they lived in a house with more bathrooms than my entire apartment building had units. When we started dating after 6 months of study sessions, his parents made their disapproval clear. "She's not from our circle, Andrew," his mother said during my first and only dinner at their home. She didn't bother lowering her voice as I returned from the bathroom. "She's a scholarship case. Your father and I expect more." Andrew defended me that night, driving me home in silence before finally saying, "They don't see what I see in you, their loss." We married 2 years after graduation in a modest ceremony at my parents' church. Andrew's parents didn't attend. His sister Eleanor came, but spent the reception making comments about the cash bar and my off-the-rack wedding dress. "Don't worry about them," my dad said as he walked me down the aisle. "That boy's lucky to have you. Never forget that." We started our married life in a one-bedroom apartment with furniture from yard sales and thrift stores. I took a job at Morrison & Associates, a small accounting firm, while Andrew tried launching various business ventures. His first 3 attempts failed: a sports memorabilia shop, a car detailing service, and a gourmet coffee cart before those were popular. Each failure dented his confidence, but not his dreams. "I just haven't found the right opportunity yet," he'd say, studying business magazines late into the night. Meanwhile, I was building my reputation at the firm. During my second year, I discovered financial discrepancies in one of our major clients' accounts. My boss initially dismissed my concerns. I was still junior after all. "These numbers don't add up," I insisted, showing him my carefully documented findings. "Someone's siphoning money from their operations budget." 2 weeks later, after I convinced him to investigate, we uncovered an embezzlement scheme by the client's CFO. The discovery saved the client from bankruptcy and earned me an early promotion. Andrew's breakthrough came in our 4th year of marriage, when he identified a gap in the industrial supply market. "Companies need specialized parts for their manufacturing equipment," he explained excitedly over our dinner of boxed macaroni and cheese. "But the ordering process is fragmented and inefficient. I could create a centralized service that streamlines everything." The concept was sound, but he needed startup capital. I'd been saving diligently from my accounting salary, building an emergency fund that now totaled $32,000. "Take it," I said, writing him a check. "I believe in your vision." Andrew's eyes widened. "Daisy, that's your safety net. I can't take all of it." "It's our safety net," I corrected him. "And we're partners. If this works, we both succeed." We shook hands across our scratch kitchen table, formalizing our partnership in the way that made sense to 2 young people who couldn't afford legal documentation. Andrew would be the face of Anderson Enterprises, handling sales and client relationships, while I would continue at my accounting job, until the business stabilized, then joined him to manage the financial operations. The business grew slowly at first, then exponentially. By our 5th anniversary, Andrew had leased a small warehouse and hired 3 employees. I would finish my day at Morrison and Associates, then spend evenings balancing Andrew's books, optimizing his tax strategy, and identifying cost-saving opportunities. We worked until midnight many nights, but the shared purpose energized us. When I became pregnant with our first child, Thomas, we faced a crossroads. The business needed more attention than ever, and Andrew suggested I leave my accounting firm to work full-time for Anderson Enterprises. But we need my steady income and benefits, I pointed out. Your salary is still inconsistent, and the business is reinvesting most profits. We compromised. I negotiated a part-time position at Morrison and Associates, maintaining our health insurance and some independent income. I dedicated my other hours to our growing company, creating financial systems that would scale with its expansion. 2 years later, our daughter Sarah arrived. With 2 small children, I made another adjustment, setting up a home office where I could work while being present for our family. Andrew's parents, seeing his growing success, suddenly wanted to be involved in our lives. Let them visit the grandchildren, I encouraged despite their earlier rejection. Family is important. Their relationship with Andrew warmed, but they always treated me with cool politeness, as if I were the nanny rather than their daughter-in-law. Eleanor followed their lead, dropping by only when Andrew was home, speaking around me rather than to me. As the children grew, so did Anderson Enterprises. My financial strategies helped the company weather economic downturns that bankrupted competitors. When an industry giant attempted a hostile takeover, I identified regulatory concerns that scuttled their plans. When tax laws changed, I restructured our operations to maximize advantages. Andrew once joked during a rare vacation, "People think I'm the genius behind the company, but you're my secret weapon." I smiled and squeezed his hand. "I don't need the spotlight. I just need you to remember we built this together." "Always," he promised, kissing my forehead. "Partners for life." I believed him completely. That was my first mistake. By our 15th anniversary, Anderson Enterprises had grown from a modest supply chain business into a diversified corporation with interest in logistics, manufacturing, and technology integration. Annual revenues exceeded $50 million, and Andrew's public profile rose accordingly. He was featured in business magazines, invited to speak at industry conferences, and welcomed into exclusive social circles. I remained in the background by mutual agreement. While Andrew entertained clients at prestigious golf clubs, I analyzed market trends and managed our increasingly complex finances. While he accepted leadership awards at black tie galas, I negotiated with banks for favorable financing terms and structured deals that expanded our market share. "You should come to these events more often," Andrew would sometimes say, but without much conviction. We both knew his narrative as a self-made entrepreneur played better without clarification about my role. Our lifestyle changed dramatically during these years. We moved from our starter home to a sprawling 5-bedroom house, then to a genuine mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in town. Andrew insisted on the ostentatious 12,000 square foot residence, despite my reservations. "We've earned this," he said when I questioned the 8-car garage for our family of 4. "People expect a certain image." "People or you?" I asked, but ultimately relented. I carved out a modest office in the mansion's east wing, maintaining my simple work habits, while the rest of our home filled with expensive art, antiques, and status symbols Andrew deemed essential. Our children grew up with privileges I had never imagined: private schools, European vacations, designer clothes. "I worry they don't understand the value of money," I told Andrew when 16-year-old Thomas crashed his 3rd car. "They don't need to struggle like we did," he replied. "That's the whole point of our success." This fundamental difference in values created a quiet friction between us. I continued working 12-hour days, treating the business like a fragile creation that required constant tending. Andrew increasingly delegated his responsibilities to pursue what he called relationship-building golf outings, hunting trips, yacht club memberships. The first signs of his affair emerged gradually. Late-night meetings became more frequent. Business trips extended over weekends. His explanations grew elaborate yet vague. The classic signs were all their new cologne gym memberships, mysterious text messages that made him smile then quickly pocket his phone. I noticed, but said nothing. Perhaps that was my second mistake, though I'm still not sure confronting him earlier would have changed anything. Eleanor, always her brother's confidant, began making odd comments during family gatherings. "Andrew's assistant is so efficient," she remarked once, watching for my reaction. "Jessica practically anticipates his every need. He's lucky to have found someone so dedicated." I simply nodded, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing my pain. Later, I searched Jessica's name and found a 26-year-old former model turned executive assistant hired 18 months prior. Her qualifications for the position were questionable at best. While Andrew grew distant emotionally, the company continued requiring my expertise. A major acquisition needed financial structuring. International expansion created tax complications. New product lines required capital allocation decisions. I handled everything with the same precision and care, as always separate from my personal concerns. During this period, I maintained my small office in our home, where I continued managing the company's financial operations. This private space became increasingly important as Andrew's behavior changed. He rarely entered it, seeing it as my domain. This would later prove significant. In the 20th year of our marriage, I began noticing financial irregularities in recent company transactions. Small at first unusual expenses, questionable allocations, resource shifts without clear business justification. "The Phoenix project needs additional funding," Andrew explained when I questioned one such transfer. "Trust me on this." I did trust him professionally, if not personally. Yet something felt wrong. The transfers increased in frequency and size. Documentation became scarcer. When I requested details, Andrew became defensive. "You're getting lost in the weeds," he said during a rare dinner at home. "Focus on the big picture." The big picture became clearer when I discovered a new holding company had been established in Wyoming, a state known for its corporate privacy laws. The entity had no clear business purpose yet was receiving substantial transfers from Anderson Enterprises. My accountant's instincts, honed over decades, sent warning signals I couldn't ignore. I began a quiet investigation, careful to leave no digital footprints. What I discovered shattered any remaining illusions about our partnership. Andrew was systematically moving assets out of our jointly built company. The pattern suggested preparation for a significant change, the kind preceding a divorce when someone wants to hide assets from a spouse. For the first time in our marriage, I began making copies of financial records, downloading transaction histories, and documenting my contributions to the company's success. I wasn't ready to confront him yet, but I wouldn't be left empty-handed if my suspicions proved correct. I still performed my duties impeccably, still attended the occasional company function when absolutely necessary, still maintained our home, and supported our now adult children. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. I was preparing for war while praying for peace. It was a Tuesday morning in April when the doorbell rang. I was reviewing quarterly projections in my home office, already dressed in the simple but elegant clothes I preferred: charcoal slacks, a cream silk blouse, minimal jewelry. Andrew had left early for a breakfast meeting after sleeping in the guest room claiming insomnia. I opened the door to find Eleanor standing there, immaculately dressed as always, holding a manila envelope. "Good morning, Daisy," she said with artificial brightness. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," I replied, stepping back to allow her entry. "Would you like some coffee?" "I can't stay," Eleanor said, remaining on the threshold. "Andrew asked me to deliver this to you. He's too busy with his business to come himself." The emphasis she placed on his business wasn't subtle. I accepted the envelope, noting its weight and the legal return address stamped in the corner. "He said it's self-explanatory." Eleanor continued watching me closely. Everything's laid out clearly. I see, I said, maintaining a neutral expression. Would you mind waiting a moment? I have something for Andrew as well. Her curiosity clearly piqued. Eleanor stepped inside while I took the envelope to my office. Inside, as expected, were divorce papers. The terms were outlined in cold legal language. I would receive the house and a settlement of $2 million a pittance compared to the company's value. There was no mention of my role in building the business or my ownership stake. Andrew was offering approximately 5% of our actual net worth. The papers trembled slightly in my hands, the only external sign of the earthquake happening inside me. 30 years of marriage, 2 children raised together, a company built from nothing to an industry leader, and this was how it ended. Divorce papers delivered by his smug sister, offering me a fraction of what I'd earned. I took several deep breaths, then walked to the antique secretary desk in the corner of my office. From a locked drawer, I removed an envelope I'd prepared months earlier when the financial irregularities first aroused my suspicions. Eleanor was examining our family photos when I returned to the foyer. "This fell from your purse," I said, handing her a photograph I'd spotted on the marble floor. She glanced down, flushing slightly as she took it. The photo showed Andrew with his arm around Jessica at what appeared to be a beach resort. They weren't dressed for business. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said, not sounding sorry at all. "I didn't realize you didn't know about her." "How long?" I asked simply. 2 years, I think," she replied, seemingly relieved to finally share the gossip. "She's pregnant now. That's why he's finally doing this. They're planning to marry after everything's finalized." The information hit like a physical blow, but years of negotiating million-dollar contracts had taught me to conceal reactions. "I see," I said again, then held out my own envelope. "Would you give this to Andrew? Tell him he might want to read these before proceeding with the divorce." Eleanor took it, weighing it speculatively. "What is it?" A tearful plea to reconsider. I allowed myself a small smile. "Not exactly, just some papers he should review." "I'll make sure he gets it," she promised, clearly intrigued. After she left, I closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to come. 30 years, 2 children, one betrayal too enormous to comprehend. When the initial wave of grief subsided, I called my oldest friend Martha, who had stood by me since college. "That bastard," she declared after I explained the situation. "I'll be there in 20 minutes with emergency chocolate and wine." "Just your support is enough," I said, regaining my composure. "I need to stay sharp now." "What was in the envelope you sent back with her?" Martha asked. "Insurance," I replied. "The kind you hope never to use, but thank God you have when you need it." "He's going to explode when he sees it, isn't he?" Martha guessed. "I'm counting on it," I confirmed. "When people get angry, they make mistakes, and I need Andrew to make several big ones right now." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the divorce papers. The same table where decades earlier Andrew and I had shaken hands as partners. The agreement he'd apparently forgotten. I had not. My phone began ringing an hour later. Andrew's name flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. It rang again, and again. Then text messages started arriving. "What the hell is this, Bart? Call me immediately. You can't be serious with these ridiculous claims." I turned off my phone. Andrew needed to stew in his own juices a bit longer. The documents I'd sent would raise his blood pressure with each page he read. I wanted him good and furious before we spoke. Martha arrived with the promised chocolate and moral support. We sat in my kitchen planning my next steps, while my silenced phone lit up with Andrew's increasingly frantic attempts to reach me. "He never thought you'd fight back, did he?" Martha observed. "No," I agreed. "That was his third mistake. 5 years earlier, when Anderson Enterprises crossed the $100 million valuation threshold, I had lunch with my mentor, Barbara Sullivan. She'd been the first female partner at Morrison & Associates before retiring to teach accounting at the university. "How's the empire?" she asked over salads at our favorite bistro. "Growing faster than ever," I replied. We're expanding into Asian markets next quarter. Barbara nodded thoughtfully. And the legal structure still operating as original partners. Informally, yes. Andrew's the CEO on paper, I'm the CFO, but major decisions are joint. Informally, she repeated, setting down her fork. Daisy, we need to talk about protection. Protection from what the business is thriving. Not business protection, personal protection. She leaned forward. In my 40 years as an accountant, I've seen this scenario play out dozens of times. Couples build something valuable together. One spouse is the public face, the other works behind the scenes. Then somewhere around year 20 or 25, Andrew would never do that, I interrupted, loyal, despite the distance that had already begun growing between us. Barbara gave me a pitying look. Everyone says that, and 80% of the time they're right. But that other 20%, they lose everything they've built because they didn't document their contributions. That conversation planted a seed I couldn't ignore. I began researching partnership laws and consulting discreetly with an attorney recommended by Barbara. His advice was sobering. Without formal documentation, your contributions could be classified as spousal support of his career rather than business partnership, he explained. Courts often favor the officially designated owner unless you have substantial evidence proving otherwise. I started building that evidence methodically. I created a secure cloud storage account under an email. Andrew knew nothing about uploading copies of every significant financial decision I'd made for the company, every strategy I developed, every crisis I'd averted. I documented the paper trail of my initial investment that funded the company's launch. I kept records of emails where Andrew and others acknowledged my role in major company successes. I maintained a log of hours worked and contributions made. When I discovered Andrew had attempted to hide assets during a cash flow crisis in our 15th year, transferring funds to his parents temporarily to keep them off the books, I documented that too. Not to use against him then, but as insurance for a future I hoped would never arrive. I hired a private investigator when the signs of Andrew's affair became too obvious to ignore. The investigator documented meetings, weekend trips, and expensive gifts charged to company accounts. I didn't confront Andrew with this information. I simply filed it away. The offshore account Andrew created in the Cayman Islands was slightly more difficult to monitor, but my years in accounting had given me resources and knowledge. I tracked the transfers, documented the timing, and noted how they correlated with his plans to restructure certain company holdings. My most valuable documentation came unexpectedly during our 30th anniversary dinner, the last one we would celebrate. After several glasses of expensive wine, Andrew became nostalgic. "Remember that check you wrote, $32,000? He reminisced. "Best investment ever made." "I remember," I said quietly. "We're partners in everything," he declared, raising his glass. "Always have been, always will be. The company wouldn't exist without you, Daisy." I'd recorded the conversation on my phone, not because I was planning anything, but because I'd taken to recording his rare moments of affection, pathetically clinging to evidence of our earlier connection. That recording now served a different purpose. The key clients who knew my role in the company became important allies as I prepared my contingency plans. Robert Chen, our first major client, had worked exclusively with me on financial terms for 20 years. Victoria Winter, CEO of our largest manufacturing partner, had negotiated directly with me during a supply chain crisis. I didn't tell them about my marital concerns, but I did ensure they understood my pivotal role in Anderson Enterprises. Their knowledge would become crucial if Andrew tried to minimize my contributions. Board members, too, had seen my work firsthand. While Andrew handled public appearances, I led quarterly financial presentations to the board. I'd cultivated those relationships independently, never relying on Andrew's connections. Several loyal employees had recently reported Andrew's unusual behaviors, removing files from the office, holding secretive meetings with attorneys, instructing IT to revoke certain access privileges. They came to me, because they trusted my leadership more than his increasingly erratic management. All of this evidence and more filled the envelope I sent back with Eleanor. Copies of partnership documents, proof of my financial contributions, evidence of Andrew's attempts to hide assets before divorce, the recording of him acknowledging our partnership, statements from key clients about my role, documentation of his misuse of company funds for personal expenses, including his affair. It was a carefully constructed legal time bomb. If Andrew proceeded with his unfair divorce terms, I would not only fight for my rightful share, but potentially trigger investigations into his financial improprieties. Now I waited for the explosion. Andrew called 27 times before giving up and driving to the house. I heard his car screech into the driveway around 6 that evening, tires protesting against the abrupt stop. Martha had left an hour earlier, making me promise to call if I needed reinforcement. I can bring my brothers, she'd offered. Martha's 3 burly brothers had always treated me like an honorary sister. That won't be necessary, I assured her. This is a battle of paperwork, not fists. The front door banged open. He still had his key, of course. Daisy, he bellowed from the foyer. Where are you? I remained seated at the kitchen table, divorce papers neatly stacked beside a legal pad filled with notes. In the kitchen, I called calmly. He stormed in, face flushed with rage, my envelope clutched in his fist. Eleanor trailed behind, looking uncomfortable but unwilling to miss the drama. What the hell is this? Andrew demanded, slapping the envelope onto the table. Documentation, I replied evenly. Evidence of our business partnership and your recent attempts to hide assets before filing for divorce. This is blackmail, he sputtered. You're threatening me. No, Andrew, I'm informing you. There's a difference. He paced the kitchen, running his hand through his silver-streaked hair I'd once loved to touch. No one will believe this garbage. I built this company. Everyone knows that. Do they? I asked, maintaining my composure. Robert Chen considers me his primary contact at Anderson Enterprises. Victoria Winters has dealt exclusively with me since the supply chain crisis in 2018. The board has seen me lead every financial presentation for 15 years. Andrew dismissed this with a wave. Supporting role? Helpful, sure, but I'm the founder, the visionary. The partnership agreement from year 1 says otherwise, I pointed out. As does your acknowledgement of my founding investment. As does the recording from our anniversary dinner. His face paled slightly. What recording? I played a brief clip from my phone, Andrew's voice slightly slurred, but unmistakable, declaring we were partners in everything, and that the company wouldn't exist without me. Eleanor's eyes widened. She'd moved to the doorway, watching our confrontation with growing unease. You recorded me without consent. Andrew's voice rose an octave. That's illegal. Single-party consent state, I corrected him. I consented to the recording. That's all that's required. Besides, you're missing the larger issue, which is your attempt to exclude me from my rightful share of a company we built together. Your creation of offshore accounts to hide assets. Your misuse of company funds to finance your affair with Jessica. Andrew flinched at his assistant's name. You don't understand the complexities of running a global enterprise. Those accounts are legitimate business entities. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Then you won't mind explaining to the IRS why personal expenses for your Caribbean getaways with Jessica were classified as business development costs. I've documented 17 instances in the past year alone. Andrew's bluster deflated slightly. He pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down heavily. What do you want, Daisy? What I've earned. Equal division of all marital assets, including the company. Full acknowledgement of my role as co-founder and partner. That's ridiculous. He scoffed, though with less conviction. Half the company. For what, keeping the books? The dismissive comment stung, but I didn't let it show. For identifying the tax strategy that saved us $3 million during the expansion. For restructuring our debt during the 2008 recession when everyone else was going bankrupt. For negotiating the Miller acquisition that doubled our market share, for catching the accounting fraud at Phoenix subsidiary before it could damage the parent company. Eleanor stepped forward. Andrew, is this true? Has Daisy really been that involved? He shot his sister a warning look, but she persisted. All these years you said she was just supporting you, helping with paperwork. You never said she was actually running the financial side of everything. She wasn't running anything, Andrew snapped. She was doing what I told her to do. Then the sound surprising even me. Is that what you think? That I've been following orders Andrew, who restructured the European division last year when it was failing? My team, he muttered. Your team implemented my plan, I corrected, after your approach lost $6 million in 2 quarters. Eleanor looked between us, decades of family mythology crumbling before her eyes. Andrew tried a different approach. Look, I acknowledge you've contributed significantly. I'll offer a better settlement. $5 million. The house? Your choice of cars. Not good enough, I said firmly. I want what's fair, what's legally mine as your business partner and spouse of 30 years. I'll fight this, he threatened. I've got the best attorneys in the state. So fight, I replied, sliding a folder across the table. But before you do review these documents your attorney should have told you about. They detail how the courts view hidden assets during divorce proceedings. It's called fraud, Andrew. It carries significant penalties. He glanced at the folder but didn't open it. Also consider how the board will react when they receive copies of these. I continued, indicating the evidence of his misappropriation of company funds. The SEC tends to take a dim view of executives who commingle personal and business expenses. Andrew's face contorted with rage and something else, fear. You wouldn't damage the company just to get back at me. I don't want to, I said honestly. I helped build it, remember, but I will protect my interests. The choice is yours, fair settlement or mutual destruction. He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. You'll regret this, Daisy. You think you understand business. Wait until you're facing my legal team alone. I won't be alone, I said calmly. And Andrew, those board members you're counting on for support, 3 of them called me directly after receiving unusual transfer authorizations from you last month. They're already concerned about your judgment. This final revelation hit its mark. Andrew's confident facade cracked completely. He grabbed the envelope of my evidence and stormed toward the door. This isn't over, he snarled. Actually, it's just beginning, I replied. Eleanor lingered after Andrew left, her expression confused and conflicted. All this time, she said quietly, I thought you were just riding his coattails. That's what he always told the family. And you believed him without question, I noted, not unkindly. He's my brother, she said, as if that explained everything. Then surprisingly, I'm sorry, Daisy, for delivering those papers like that. For all of it, I guess. The apology was awkward but seemed genuine. Perhaps Eleanor was realizing her brother wasn't the hero she'd built him up to be. Thank you for saying that, I acknowledged. After Eleanor left, I sank into a kitchen chair, the adrenaline draining from my system. The confrontation had gone as well as could be expected, but this was only the opening salvo in what would likely be a lengthy battle. I allowed myself a moment of grief for the marriage that had died long before today. Then I dried my tears, straightened my shoulders, and began preparing for war. Andrew's retaliation came swiftly. By 9 the next morning, I received an email from the company's network administrator, regretfully informing me that my access to all company systems had been revoked on orders from the CEO. By noon, a formal letter arrived by courier stating that my consulting arrangement with Anderson Enterprises was terminated effective immediately. The letter, signed by Andrew's personal attorney, referred to me as an occasional advisor rather than the chief financial officer I had functionally been for decades. He's rewriting history, my attorney Michael Donovan observed when I forwarded him the letter. Classic move, but easily countered with your documentation. Andrew's next move was hiring Patricia Blackwell, an aggressive divorce attorney known for her scorched earth tactics. The legal community called her the piranha. Within days, she filed motions challenging every aspect of my claims, demanding immediate vacating of the family home, and even questioning my mental stability. "She's trying to intimidate you," Michael explained during our strategy meeting. "They want you frightened off balance and willing to settle quickly." "I'm not afraid," I replied, though that wasn't entirely true. I was terrified of losing everything I'd worked for, of being erased from the company history, of having my contributions dismissed as wifely support rather than business partnership. But fear could be channeled into preparation. While Andrew's legal team filed motions, I methodically built my case. Michael arranged depositions of key employees who could testify to my role. We documented every significant contribution I'd made to the company's success, from the initial investment through the most recent financial strategies. The first major victory came unexpectedly. Linda Matthews Andrews, executive secretary for 15 years before his relationship with Jessica, contacted me privately. "I've been subpoenaed for a deposition," she explained over coffee at a discreet cafe across town. "They expect me to support Mr. Anderson's version of events." "And will you?" I asked directly. Linda smiled thinly. "I plan to tell the truth, that you were effectively co-running the company from the beginning, that Mr. Anderson referred to you as his partner in private conversations, that he routinely brought company problems to you for solutions." "Andrew won't be happy about that testimony," I noted. "Mr. Anderson fired me after 20 years when Jessica complained I wasn't supportive of their relationship," Linda replied. "My loyalty has its limits." Linda wasn't the only unexpected ally. Several board members concerned about Andrew's recent behavior reached out confidentially. They couldn't take public positions during ongoing litigation, but they provided valuable information about Andrew's attempts to restructure company leadership without proper authorization. The most surprising development came when Jessica herself appeared at my door one rainy evening in May, visibly pregnant and obviously distressed. "I need to talk to you," she said, rainwater dripping from her designer coat. "It's important." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. Whatever her relationship with my husband, the young woman looked genuinely upset. "He told me you were separated for years," she blurted out, once seated in my living room. "That the marriage existed on paper only, that you'd agreed to divorce once the timing was right for the company." "None of that is true," I said gently. "I'm figuring that out," she replied, tears welling in her eyes. "When the lawyer started calling, asking about dates and records, I started questioning everything. Andrew's been lying to me too, hasn't he?" "Most likely," I acknowledged. Jessica wiped her eyes. "I thought I was building a future with an honest man. Now I don't know what to believe." I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for this woman, barely older than my daughter, carrying my husband's child while discovering his capacity for deception. "What will you do?" I asked. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I wanted you to know I didn't intentionally get involved with a married man. That's not who I am." After Jessica left, I called Michael to update him on this new development. "She might be willing to testify about Andrew's misrepresentations," I suggested. "Let's not count on it," he advised. "Pregnant, facing an uncertain future, she's vulnerable to pressure from Andrew. But it's interesting she reached out to you directly." The most startling visit came from Eleanor appearing at my door a week after our kitchen confrontation. "I have information," she said without preamble, "about Andrew's plans." "Come in," I invited, curious despite my wariness. Eleanor perched uncomfortably on my sofa, clutching her handbag like a shield. "He's moving company funds to the Wyoming entity. Significant amounts. The paperwork calls it strategic restructuring, but it's clearly preparation for hiding assets." "How do you know this?" I asked. I overheard him on the phone with his attorney, and I may have looked at some documents in his home office when he stepped out. Eleanor looked both guilty and defiant. "What he's doing isn't right, Daisy. Not to you, not to the company." Her unexpected alliance shifted the dynamic of our conflict. With Eleanor's information, my legal team filed for emergency injunctions preventing further transfer of company assets. A forensic accountant discovered Andrew had already moved nearly $30 million to entities outside normal company operations. The board called an emergency meeting to address these revelations. Andrew attempted to exclude me, but 3 board members insisted I be present given my financial expertise and the nature of the concerns. I arrived prepared with comprehensive documentation of the questionable transfers, their timing, and their correlation with our divorce proceedings. Andrew arrived with Patricia Blackwell and a rehearsed statement about routine financial operations mischaracterized by a vindictive spouse. The presentation became a turning point when Walter Garrison, the longest-serving board member, interrupted Andrew's practiced explanation. "These transfers began exactly 2 days after you consulted divorce attorneys," Walter observed. "Are we to believe that's coincidental? The company's financial planning operates independently of my personal life," Andrew insisted. "Then perhaps you can explain why these transfers lack the standard documentation and approval processes," I interjected, displaying the normal authorization procedures alongside the abbreviated process used for the questionable transfers. "And why they're all going to entities with obscured ownership structures," added Diane Miller, another board member. The meeting ended with a vote to freeze all major asset transfers pending full investigation. Andrew stormed out, Patricia Blackwell trailing behind him, already on her phone. Our children, Thomas and Sarah, had initially maintained careful neutrality in the conflict. Both lived in different states, building their own careers and families. When the situation escalated to board-level intervention, however, they could no longer ignore the disintegration of their parents' marriage and business relationship. "Dad says you're trying to take control of his company," Thomas said during a difficult phone call. "That you've turned bitter in your 50s and want to destroy what he built. Is that what you believe?" I asked, heart aching at my son's willingness to accept such a characterization. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he admitted. "The dad I thought I knew wouldn't hide assets or cheat on his wife. The mom I thought I knew wouldn't be fighting for corporate control. I'm fighting for recognition of what I've always been, an equal partner in building this company," I explained. "I never wanted this fight. I just refused to be erased." Both children eventually came to visit, examining the evidence for themselves. Their father's narrative collapsed under documentation spanning decades, reinforced by testimony from long-term employees and business associates. "Why didn't you ever tell us your role in the company?" Sarah asked, reviewing financial strategies I developed that had saved millions. "It didn't seem important that you knew the details," I explained. "Your father and I were partners. The specific contributions seemed irrelevant as long as we both acknowledged them." "But he didn't, did he?" Thomas realized. "Not outside your private conversations." "Apparently not," I acknowledged. Their support, once they understood the facts, became another unexpected source of strength. The family unity Andrew had counted on fracturing in his favor instead consolidated around the truth, however uncomfortable it might be. The press eventually caught wind of the story. Business journalists who had long profiled Andrew as a self-made success began investigating the claims in our court filings. Several reached out for comments, which my legal team advised against providing directly. Instead, we referred them to public records and court documents. A prominent business magazine published an investigative piece titled "The Woman Behind Anderson Enterprises," featuring interviews with former employees, clients, and business partners who confirmed my essential role in building the company. The article included a damning quote from Robert Chen. "I've worked with Daisy Anderson for 25 years. She's always been the financial brain of the operation. Anyone in the industry knows that." Public opinion, once solidly behind the charismatic CEO, Andrew had cultivated as his image began shifting. His attempts to portray me as a bitter, greedy spouse fell flat against decades of documented contributions and professional relationships. As pressure mounted from the board, shareholders, and the press, Andrew made a desperate final attempt to settle privately. $10 million, his attorney offered during a mediation session. The house, Full confidentiality. Not nearly enough, Michael responded without consulting me. We had already agreed on our minimum terms. 20 million baht came the counteroffer, but Miss Anderson relinquishes all claims to company ownership. My client built this company equally with Mr. Anderson, Michael stated firmly. Her ownership isn't negotiable. The mediation ended without resolution, setting the stage for what promised to be a very public trial. 2 days later, facing mounting evidence of financial improprieties that could trigger regulatory investigations, Andrew finally conceded. The settlement acknowledged my role as co-founder and equal partner in Anderson Enterprises. I received 50% ownership formalized through voting shares and a board position. The offshore accounts were repatriated with penalties paid to relevant tax authorities. Our personal assets were divided equally, including properties, investments, and art collections. The board, having lost confidence in Andrew's leadership during the proceedings, voted to place him on administrative leave pending a full investigation of his financial management. They appointed me interim CEO, while a permanent leadership solution was determined. Jessica ended her relationship with Andrew after learning the full extent of his deceptions. Their child, a daughter, was born 3 months after our divorce was finalized. Despite everything, I encouraged Thomas and Sarah to welcome their half-sister into the family. Children shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes. Andrew's sister Eleanor, having witnessed her brother's true character, apologized for her years of cold treatment. I believed what he told me, she explained during a surprisingly pleasant lunch. That you were just a supportive wife who got lucky marrying him. I never questioned why a supposedly unimportant spouse was handling multi-million-dollar financial strategies. Family loyalty is powerful, I acknowledged. It can blind us sometimes. Well, my eyes are open now, she replied. Better late than never, I suppose. Our relationship would never be close, but the mutual respect that developed proved healing for both of us. The company thrived under more transparent leadership. I established clearer governance structures, improved financial disclosure practices, and implemented ethical guidelines that would prevent the kind of unilateral actions Andrew had attempted. My unexpected public profile created opportunities to advocate for women in business, particularly those whose contributions often went uncredited. I established a scholarship for female accounting and finance students, taught occasional classes at the business school, and mentored young professionals navigating male-dominated industries. You've become a role model, Sarah observed during a visit 6 months after the settlement. Women at my firm talk about your case all the time. That wasn't my intention, I admitted. But it's important, she insisted. How many other women have built companies alongside men who took all the credit? Your story gives them courage to demand recognition. The media attention eventually faded as newer business scandals captured headlines. I declined most interview requests, preferring to focus on rebuilding the company and my personal life. The few public statements I made emphasized collaborative leadership and proper governance rather than the details of my divorce. Andrew, facing diminished prospects after the settlement, eventually relocated to Florida. He started a small consulting firm, though his reputation had suffered significantly. Our direct communication remained limited to necessary discussions about family events involving our children and grandchildren. 1 year after the settlement, we encountered each other at Thomas's daughter's birthday party. The awkward tension was palpable as we navigated the social obligations of divorced grandparents. You're doing well with the company, Andrew commented during a brief moment alone on the patio. Stock price is up 30% since the restructuring. The leadership team is strong, I replied neutrally. Everyone's contributing their best work. He nodded, looking older and somehow diminished despite his still handsome features. I underestimated you, Daisy. That was my biggest mistake. One of several, I noted not unkindly. I suppose I deserve that, he acknowledged. For what it's worth, you were always the better business mind between us. I just couldn't admit it, not even to myself. The belated recognition meant less than I might have expected. I no longer needed Andrew's approval or acknowledgement to validate my worth. That realization was perhaps the most valuable outcome of the entire painful process. We built something remarkable together, I said after a moment. That's the truth that matters regardless of what came after. He nodded again, and we returned to the party, our brief moment of reconciliation, neither fixing the past nor promising future friendship, but offering a glimpse of mutual respect that had been absent for too long. My life now balances company leadership with personal pursuits. I'd long neglected piano lessons, abandoned in my 20s the photography that once brought me joy, friendships that had taken secondary importance to business demands. I discovered there is indeed life after betrayal, after divorce, after the shattering and rebuilding of one's identity. The envelope I sent back with Eleanor that fateful day contained evidence accumulated over years of quiet preparation. But the true contents were something less tangible, yet more powerful. The documentation of my own worth, the refusal to be erased, the insistence on recognition for work well done. If you've ever been underestimated or overlooked, I hope my story reminds you to document your contributions and stand firm in your value. Leave a comment sharing how you proved your worth in the face of doubt or dismissal. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the best response to betrayal is simply revealing the truth about who you really are and what you've accomplished. Thank you for listening to my journey from invisible partner to recognized leader.